Hi everyone, this is a new channel with scary stories with which you can relax to the sound of rain. If my channel helped you, please support this video with a like and subscribe. And you can also write out what time you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. I'm not supposed to touch anyone. That's been the rule as long as I can remember. Mostly, my earliest memories are of my aunts and uncles, smiling at me behind glass in their white coats. Of air hugs and blown kisses, but I have distant memories of another place. Of men with guns. Of a woman with a touch like silk. I think she was my mother. I remember a blinding light, and a sound like thunder. The next thing I knew, I was here. I'd been behind glass for a long time. No windows to see outside. No door in or out, only a slot for meals. All my uncles and aunts have grown old and gray, yet I don't seem to change. They never answered my questions. Who am I? I would ask. Where do I come from? All they ever told me is that I was sick. That I had to be kept locked away for my own safety, until a cure was found. Even though I felt fine, I trusted them. I had no choice. I've had all I ever needed here. I've read hundreds of books. Learned to paint and draw. Watched hours and hours of Gilligan's Island. But what I always wanted more than anything was to touch someone, even for a second. I tried, once. A few years ago, one of my aunts was pushing supper through the meal slot. I backed against the wall like always, but I couldn't help it. Without thinking, I ran forward and grabbed her hand. I wish I hadn't. The second my hand touched hers, her skin turned black and brittle, like burned paper. It crept up her arms until the flesh peeled off her skull, her eyes smoldering with yellow fire. Blood ran out of her mouth, boiling. She screamed and screamed, but all I could do was sob "I'm sorry" until security came. By the time they got to her, she was a shadow burned into the floor. The meal slot became automated after that. I finally understood. I really was sick. Very sick. But it wasn't my safety I was in here for. I thought I would be here forever, a freak in a cage. Until last week, when all my aunts and uncles gathered in the chamber one morning, with exciting news for me. I was cured. They told me the country needed me. That some government men needed my help on a big mission, where I could touch as many people as I wanted. Men in rubber suits were going to take me away, to see the outside for the first time in forever. Just a few more days. I was so happy I couldn't help but cry. "And before you go, we have a gift," said one of my uncles, a smile beaming across his face. I waited, excited and confused at once. "Your name is Makitsura Yamamoto. You were born in a town called Nagasaki, in the year 1945. The next story? The town that sleeps before 10 p.m. I live in a town where everyone sleeps before 10 p.m. It has become some kind of custom now. People lock their doors, turn off their lights, and crawl into bed as though their lives depend on it. Even the stray dogs vanish into silence, and the world outside becomes still. As a kid, I'd ask my parents, "Why does everyone sleep so early?" They'd always give me the same answer: "That's just the way it's always has been." But that answer never satisfied me. Why was it the way it's always been? What was so important about sleeping by 10 p.m.? My curiosity grew as I did. There was something wrong about the stillness of our nights. No one ever woke up, not even for a glass of water or to use the bathroom. Once they went to sleep, they were dead to the world until morning. I'd overheard whispers once, conversations among the adults. "He broke the rule," someone had said. Never woke up again. They saw me listening and stopped talking, but the seed of curiosity had already been planted. What really happened after 10 p.m., one night, I decided to find out. That evening, I followed the routine like always: dinner at 7, TV until 9, and then to bed. But this time, I pretended to sleep. I lay there with my eyes closed, listening as the town settled into its nightly stillness. At exactly 10 p.m., everything became silent. A silence so heavy it felt alive. I waited for what felt like hours, though it was probably just 30 minutes. Then, slowly, I opened my eyes. My heart pounded as I sat up, every creak of the bed frame sounding deafening in the oppressive quiet. I tiptoed to my bedroom door and cracked it open. The hallway was empty. I could hear the sound of my own breathing. Slowly, I crept to my parents' room to check on them. They were fast asleep. Their faces were calm and undisturbed. For a while, I just stood there, watching them, but as I turned back toward my room, that's when I felt it. A presence. Not something I could see or hear, but something I knew was there. The air grew colder, pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. The hair on my arms stood on end, and my instincts screamed for me to run, and then I heard it. "Why are you awake?" I froze. My mouth went dry, and my limbs felt like lead, but then I thought, it's Mom. It has to be Mom. I felt relief for a moment, but as I turned toward the voice, I noticed my parents' room. The door was still ajar, and I could see them lying in bed, motionless, breathing softly. Asleep. If they were asleep, then who? The voice cut through my thoughts, louder this time, with anger. "Why are you not sleeping? You were supposed to be asleep." The sound was coming closer. My chest tightened as I turned the corner. And then I saw it. It wasn't my mother. Not my father. Not anything human. The figure was impossibly tall and thin, its skin stretched taut over its skeletal frame. Its face, or the space where a face should have been, was a void, a swirling black emptiness. "It's all your fault, you should have stayed asleep." Panic overtook me, and I ran. My legs felt like lead, my breath came in sharp gasps. But I didn't stop until I slammed the door of my room shut behind me. The knocking started immediately, loud, violent, relentless. Each blow shook the door, and I pressed myself against it, tears streaming down my face. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the knocking stopped. Silence. For what felt like hours, I stood there, trembling, waiting for the next sound. When nothing came, I thought it was over. I thought I was safe. I opened the door, and that's when I realized something was wrong. The world outside wasn't the same. The air was thick, suffocating, and the walls of the house seemed warped, their colors dull and faded. The clock on the wall caught my eye, and my stomach dropped. The hands weren't moving. It was 10 p.m. And it always would be. I don't know how long I've been here. Days? Weeks? Years? Time doesn't exist anymore, not in this place. The town is empty now. No parents, no neighbors, no life. Just me, wandering the streets, searching for an escape that doesn't exist. I haven't eaten or drunk anything since that night. Yet I'm not dead. I should be dead. But I'm not. My body has changed. I've grown taller, and possibly thin. My skin stretches tightly over my bones, and my reflection in broken glass reveals the truth. My face is gone, replaced by a void, a black nothingness. I don't feel human anymore. The memories of my life before are fading. I've grown angry, angrier with each passing moment. At myself, at the town, at everything. And then, one day, I saw something. A boy. He was small, frightened. I watched as he tiptoed down the hallway, peeking into his parents' room. The sight filled me with rage. "Why are you awake?" The boy froze, his eyes locking onto mine. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I wasn't watching him. I was watching myself. And now, I understood. I had stayed awake. And now, I was the one who ensured no one else ever would. The next story? I haul away junk from hoarder homes. What I found at my last job made me quit. For most of my years, I'd been dragged around by the twin steeds of addiction and crime without a thought beyond my next fix. Then I was arrested. That was the wake-up call I needed. Once I was inside, I had to deal with my addiction with both therapy and forced sobriety. It wasn't easy. During my lowest moment, vomiting into a prison toilet, I found something I thought I had lost: hope. I came out the other side of my stint healthier and ready to take my life in a new direction. Prison had been the tough love I needed. I was ready for the free world again. I soon discovered the free world wasn't ready for me. Part of my release agreement was that I needed to find steady employment. I thought that sounded simple enough, but I had no idea how cruel the world could be to anyone who colored outside life's lines. Despite being capable, willing, and reformed, no one wanted to hire me. My parole officer told me not to stress because he knew a few people who might be able to help. He saw that I was trying and made a few phone calls. He hooked me up with Pete, a good dude who owned a junk removal company named Moving Buddies. "Been out long?" he asked when I sat with him. "About a month." "How did the family take it? Don't have one to lean on anymore," I said. "Part of the reason I ended up where I ended up." "You know, I understand," Pete said. "We all deal with grief in our own way. Most of those ways don't end in jail time." I said, "No, they do not. But it brought you back from the dead and to my doorstep. I'd say that's a win/win." Less than 2 days later, Pete hired me, and I was ready to go. Despite the name, Moving Buddies was not a moving company in the traditional sense. It was a junk removal company that specialized in cleaning up evictions and hoarder homes. It was long, backbreaking work, but it kept me busy. I welcomed the distraction. I wasn't even the only former con on the team. My partner and driver, Devin Baker, or D, as he liked to be called, had also done time in his past. We chatted about it the first day, and it bonded us. Like me, he had gone in for armed robbery, but he had received more time. Like me, he struggled once he got out. He took this job out of desperation too, but he said it saved his life. "I mean, don't get me wrong, it sucks," he said as we drove to our new job. "But it's better than fucking jail, you know? Plus, Pete's not a bad guy. Tied as a dolphin's asshole with money, but he gets the life. He'll cut you some slack." I was starting to think people like that didn't exist. "Nobody loves ex-cons," he said. "Wait until you start up with the dating apps. You're gonna really feel the hate then." I laughed. "Who'd hate a cuddly teddy bear like you?" "D?" He laughed. "That's what I'm saying. But it's cold out there, brother. Ice cold." We were headed out to our gig for the day. Some old fart had passed and left a mess for his kids. I hated hoarder homes because there was always some extra bullshit hidden in the piles. You could not imagine smells. They stick with you hours after your shift. We found dead pets and living wild animals in some homes. Never a dull moment. We arrived and were greeted by an exhausted-looking man in his late 40s. He was the son of the dead guy and told us what we already knew from the work order. I felt sympathy for him. He inherited a huge mess. "Sorry about how it looks. Dad went, well, crazy in the last few years. All he talked about was conspiracies and people out to get him, and he caught himself. He changed, you know? Then he let this place turn into this. Not unusual in our line of work," I said, trying to comfort him. "Believe it or not, this isn't even the worst we've ever seen." He added. That seemed to ease the man's mind, and he left us to do our work. He sidled up to me as he left and nodded at the house. "Yo, this is the worst fucking house I've ever seen." "Easy." When we finally cracked the tomb's seal, the full brunt of the smell hit us like the concussive wave of an atomic bomb. A potent combination of death, rotting food, and vomit stung our nostrils. He wasn't lying. This was the worst ever. Let's have a smoke before we get hip deep in this shit, he said, pulling out his vape. Agreed, I said, pulling out my crinkled pack of Marlboro Reds and Naked Lady Bic. Those kill you, man, he said, nodding at my pack of cigarettes. Those chemicals won't, shit, he said, exhaling a massive puff of vapor. I didn't say all that now. We finished our smokes and steadied ourselves. We wiped vapor rub under our noses and opened the door. The entryway was crammed with old garbage. The house had so many flies that I thought it might get yanked from its foundation and take to the air. The old man may have died, but there was still some life inside this place. Goddamn, he said. How did the city not condemn this place? Maybe he knew people in high places. Should have met a garbage man, he said, getting to work. Hoarders were the worst. What they all have in common is some sort of mental break that sets them on this course. I've found it's often associated with some kind of loss, a job, a spouse, a child. They compensate for their loss by trying to save anything that could be important, or that they could use later. They never do. Thus, you get home stuffed with towering monuments to our disposable culture. The hell? He said from a corner of the living room. I walked over to him and looked down at the ground where he was pointing. It's trash, I said. Under the bag, man. I moved the bag and nearly vomited. Under the bag were the remains of 2 very dead cats. They looked like they'd recently died but were under a few ancient garbage bags. I saw a wrapper for MCDLT in one bag, and they stopped selling that in the 90s. You didn't know those were cats? I know they're cats. Look at their backs. I did, and that's when I saw what looked like a bite mark on the remains. Something with razor-sharp teeth had chomped some of the spines away. You'd miss it if you quickly glanced at the remains, but when you looked at them, you could clearly see the bite marks. What the hell did that? I asked. That looks like a lion bite. Bro, he said, shaken up. If we find a lion in here, I'm gone. I joked. It may not be hungry, though, considering he seemed to have recently had a snack. Shit's not funny. He said, I have 2 cats. Scooby and Shaggy. My bad. I said, did this old man put them there? He asked. Because this is some old-ass garbage, and those are recently dead. Maybe whatever ate them dragged them here. Want me to remove them? I asked, but didn't wait for his response. As I went to bag up the cats, we heard something skitter on the floor behind us. We both turned around, and a few trash bags rolled off a pile and spilled on the floor. If there is actually a fucking lion in here, I swear to God. I whispered. Sure, he said, his eyes scanning the room. We both looked around for the source of the noise but didn't see anything. I was about to say something when we heard more scrambling off to our left. I rushed over, moved away a few bags, and let out a terrified, high-pitched scream. After the initial shock, I started laughing. What? He asked. I reached down and pulled up a beat-up jester doll buried in the stacks. Its porcelain face had split down the middle at some point, and the left side was gone. The right side's painted face had worn away with time and exposure to garbage juice, but one unblinking eye stared out at us. Its long limbs hung toward the ground, hunched over like it had a bad back. Who would want this? I asked. Weird fucking hoarders. We heard skittering again, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a massive rat run from under some old cardboard boxes and back towards the bedrooms. I dropped the doll and chased after it, but it was gone before I could do anything. He shook his head. Be careful when we're grabbing shit, he said. Those things will take off the tip of your fingers. I grabbed the doll and propped it up on the pile of trash so it looked like it was sitting on a throne of garbage. I'll hire the jester to look out for us. It needs a name. What about Trash Schley? As soon as I said it, the doll's heavy limbs made it slump to its side. He laughed. Trash Schley already sleeping on the job. We went back to work. We set about clearing out the living room and kitchen before we moved on to the closets and pantries in those rooms. Closets were the worst part of a hoarder's home. They crammed closets full of the weirdest shit known to man. Once, we pulled 8 taxidermied animals out of a living room closet. It was a nativity scene. Baby Jesus was a stuffed dormouse. We played rock, paper, scissors, and D lost. He had one closet duty. I set back to clearing out the living room leading towards the hallway and let D work on the closet. D had moved out 3 garbage bags when I heard him yell and fall out of the closet. I ran over to him as he was scooting away from the closet door. He was genuinely spooked. I helped him up and asked him what happened. It took him a second to put his thoughts together. Something touched me. What? I swear to God, man. Something reached out and touched my hand. It was probably, I said before he cut me off. Bitch, I know what a hand feels like. A fucking hand touched my arm. Okay, I said. Gonna let the bitch comments slide. My bad, man, he said, shaking his head. But that shit ain't never fucking happened to me before. You got a flashlight? Let's take a look, in the truck, he said. I'll go grab it. He left, and I shook my head. I was working under the belief that he had touched a rat's tail, or something. Rats loved the stink of trash, but people tended to avoid it. The smell in this place would keep Oscar the Grouch at arm's length. From behind me, I heard the rats scrambling around. I went over to where I had heard the noise but didn't see anything. He came back into the house and saw me looking for the rat. Heard something? He asked. I think we may have a few friends watching us, I said, glancing through the garbage piles. Can I see that flashlight? He handed it to me, and I shined the beam into the sea of living room trash bags. Nothing jumped out at me, so I assumed the rats were adept at hiding from humans. Something did catch my eye, though. Trash lay. The doll wasn't in the place where I had left it. Maybe it had fallen during the closet panic, and I hadn't noticed. I plucked up the doll again. It might have been our jester friend here, I said, and not the rats. I don't like that doll, Dee said. Reminds me of Poltergeist, the fucking clown thing. Man, that messed me up good. Maybe we should put a tracker on it. I joked. Dee didn't laugh. Good idea. He eyed something on the ground and grabbed it. Put this on it. He handed me an old cat collar with a little bell on it. I gave him a look, but he insisted. I dutifully put it around Trashley's neck and gave it a shake. The bell jingled, and he looked satisfied. I put Trashley back on the trash pile throne and handed Dee back the flashlight. Let's go see about your closet hand. I walked over and pulled the closet door back open. Hey, I said to the potential person in the closet. We're gonna empty that closet. If you want to get out of here without the two of us stomping you, I'd leave now. Nothing happened. I wasn't surprised. It's not that I doubted Dee. If anything, the dude was honest to a fault, but the story was so far-fetched. There's no way anyone could be in there. But still, Dee is honest. If he felt a hand, he might have felt a hand. You gonna feel around in there or what? He asked me. I said let's look. You gotta feel too. I felt. I didn't agree to that. I protested. Neither did I, but here we are. He said, don't make me pull rank. I wasn't going to win. The only thing left to do would be to stick my arm into the garbage closet, hoping that a phantom hand wouldn't grab my arm. What the fuck even was this job? Dee shined a light into the darkness. 2 bags fell and split open on the floor. One was filled with maggots. I looked back at Dee. If I'm sticking my hand in there, you're picking up the creepy crawlies. Fine, he said. Now come on, man. Let's do this. I sighed and reached into the closet. It was packed with smelly garbage bags, and the old owner had also heaped in a bunch of ragged blankets to fill the gaps between the bags. I slid my arm into a tar-black opening and felt around in the darkness. How long do I need to feel around for a hand? Bro, just do me a solid, huh? I need to know I'm not crazy. I pushed my arm deeper into the hole and felt around the trash bags. I half expected D to laugh and tell me this was some elaborate prank he was pulling. But when I glanced back at him, he intently watched me. There was real fear in his eyes, a thing I didn't think I'd ever see out of him. I don't think. My hand brushed against something long and pointy, like a finger. My eyes bugged open because D ran closer with the flashlight. You feel it, don't you? I did feel it. It was a hand. I reached around, found the wrist, and pulled as hard as possible. All the bags around me started to roll. And before I knew it, my force sent me falling back on my ass. The rank garbage rained all over me, but I still held onto that arm. I pushed the bags off myself, maggots landing on my face and hair, and stood up. D dropped the flashlight and was doubled over with laughter. I looked down at my hand and saw why. I was holding an arm, but it didn't belong to a man or some creature. It was a mannequin arm. I threw it down with disgust and shook all the creepy crawlies off me. D had dropped to the floor, barely able to breathe. I was hot. This job was bad enough, and now this? Did you fucking know it was a mannequin arm? I swear I didn't, man. But that shit is funny as fuck. He has the kind of laugh that can bring anyone around to join him. Not long after, I fell under the spell of his Pied Piper chuckles. I threw the arm at him, and he caught it. He helped me off the ground and apologized between the laughs. He patted my back with the arm and started cracking up again. I hurled the arm across the room. That's when we heard Trashy's bells ringing. We looked to where I had left the jester, but it wasn't there anymore. D and I locked eyes. We both wanted to speak but found our ability to do so gone as if we had violated an agreement with Ursula, the sea witch. We heard the little bell jingling again, this time coming from one of the back rooms. How? Was all D could push out. Rat, I said. Has to be. Why are the rats taking the doll? Boom. The closet door behind us slammed shut. We both jumped, and when D's feet hit the ground, he sprinted out the front door. I wanted to join him, but I caught a shadow moving along the wall leading to the kitchen and turned to it. In my peripheral vision, it looked like something with long limbs skulking into the kitchen. The bells started ringing again. It was still in the bedrooms. Hello? I called out. Nobody answered. I took a step toward the crowded hallway that led to the back bedrooms. Is anyone there? This time, there was the sound of something moving in the kitchen, unlike the quick skittering we had heard previously. This was someone moving slowly and deliberately. Someone trying not to make any noise. They were either trying to hide from me or stalk me. Neither idea sparked joy. Bro, I'm sorry, he said, peering in from the front door. I didn't mean to run away like a little kid, man. I turned to him and put my fingers to my lips to shush him. He nodded, and I pointed toward the kitchen. He wearily inched back into the house, whipping his head around to see if anything around him was out of the ordinary. Feeling assured he was safe, he crept in but kept the flashlight in his hand cocked and ready to swing. The bells started dinging again in the back room. I pointed towards myself and then the back rooms. He nodded, but he wasn't going to join me back there. I wasn't even sure I could make my way back there as quietly as I wanted. There was a small path between the piles of trash, and I was too big for it. I was sure I'd make a racket cutting through, giving whoever was back there a fair warning that someone was coming. Regardless, I was going to try. As I took my first step, we heard something moving in the kitchen again. This time, he saw the same shadow I had. He mimicked to me that he thought a man was in there, and that he was going to head that way. I delayed my trip to the back bedrooms and hung back just in case he needed some help. Still, after the adrenaline of the moment passed, I had second thoughts about going to the back bedrooms alone. It seemed like the kind of decision a dumb character would make in a slasher movie. I may not be smart, but I ain't that dumb either. I quietly stepped toward the kitchen, flanking D as he approached. We heard the cabinet doors open and slam close. There was more movement on the floor as well. It sounded like more than one rat. Then the strangest noise came out of there, the jingling of a bell. Someone threw a trash bag toward the living room as we stood there. It landed with a wet splat and spilled the rotten innards across the floor. The food in the bag was so old it had melted into a putrid black ooze. It sprayed onto D's pants. "You about to get fucked up," D yelled. He rushed into the kitchen, flashlight held high, ready to crown the bag tosser. I ran behind him, believing a show of force might deter whoever was in there. But when we entered the room, there wasn't a person in there. We saw 2 rats running along the counters, but no lanky-limbed person. The rats squealed, dove into the trash pile, and disappeared from our view. He looked over at me and shook his head. "There was someone in here, man. Those damn rats didn't throw that bag. Can I help you, gentlemen?" came a voice from the front door. Dee and I turned to see a nicely dressed middle-aged white guy standing there. His fake but friendly smile was plastered on his face and didn't present any immediate threat. With this job, you always get looky-loos who want to see how demented their neighbor had been, but they rarely walk into the house. Considering everything that had happened up to this point, the Pope could show up, and we'd be leery. "You can't be in here, man," Dee said. "I'm always here," the man said. "Well, then your streak ends today," Dee said, keeping calm. "This is a job site now and isn't safe for the general public." The man started laughing. "I'm not the general public. Did you know the man that lived here?" I asked. "In a sense. I watched him for years," the stranger said. "He made many poor decisions. Strange person. Well, he's not even a person anymore," Dee said, his tone shifting. "He's passed on and left us this mess to clean up. Since we're in control of the site, we can ask you to leave. If you get hurt, we can get sued. If we get sued, I get fired. I get fired, my landlord kicks me out of my place, and I have to live in my car. Since I'm not trying to live out of my beater, you have to go, sir. You live off Baltimore Avenue, right?" Dee's face dropped. He did live near there, but how did this guy know that? Dee squared up and took a more aggressive posture. "Who are you?" Dee asked. "You work with Pete. I know Pete," he said. "But he's never met me." "What the hell does that mean?" "Yeah," I said. "You're speaking in riddles. Just tell us who you are and what you want." Before the man could speak, we heard Trashley's bell jingling again. This time, it was coming from inside the kitchen despite my having heard it in the back bedroom just minutes earlier. How did it get into the kitchen? Dee and I turned back and saw a rat run across the floor with a cat collar around its neck. "Was that the collar on Trashley?" I asked. "Yeah," Dee said. We heard the jingling as the rat dove into the sea of trash bags and disappeared from sight. Then, it went quiet again. "Where is the doll?" I asked. We returned to where the stranger had been standing, but he was gone. I glanced back toward the front door and saw it swinging on its hinges. I looked at Dee and shrugged. As weird as that dude was, he was gone now. "Who the fuck was that? How did he know where I lived?" He said. "What the hell is going on, man?" There was more jingling in the kitchen again. We turned away from the open front door and back to the noise. Dee and I entered the garbage-stuffed room and scanned for the bell's location. It rang a few more times but stopped as suddenly as it started. I elbowed Dee in the ribs and nodded at the kitchen window. It was mostly covered with old shoeboxes and a ratty old curtain, but you could see shadows moving outside. We saw the stranger pass by the window, heading toward the back door. We waited a beat, and then the door handle started shaking like he was trying to get in. The door must have been locked because he didn't open it. He was beginning to get frustrated and yelled out, "Hey man, you gotta get the fuck out now." "Okay?" The man stopped but didn't walk away. You could still see him outside in the curtain. Dee, thoroughly annoyed at this point, marched through the trash and ripped open the curtain on the back door. Instead of seeing the man standing there though, we saw nothing but the waist-high grass in the backyard. "What the?" Dee mumbled and let go of the curtain. You could see the stranger's outline again when it swung back into place. I audibly gasped, and Dee grabbed the curtain and yanked it away again. Again, there was nothing but grass waving in the breeze. "How?" I said. Before Dee could respond, one of the cabinet doors swung open, and trash lay spilled out. The doll landed with a thud on the counter. We watched the lifeless ragdoll as it lay on the ugly formica and waited for it to move again. As if it read our thoughts, the doll's left arm fell and dangled off the edge. That was enough to drive us both out of the kitchen. As we returned to the living room, the front door opened again. The stranger had come back. Dee walked up to him and got into the man's face. I ran over and put an arm on Dee's shoulder, but he shrugged me off. "Who the hell are you, man? What are you doing here? I came to check on this place and see if things were in order." "You two seem to be the perfect men for the job. Did Pete send you?" I asked. "Did you know the guy that owned this place? He was one of the people we monitored. He was meddling with things beyond his control, and he paid for that curiosity. You killed him? No. He awakened something he shouldn't have. He paid for that decision. I came to witness this." "Witness what? Maybe we should call Pete," I said. "Get this straightened out. I didn't know dolls could stand like that," the stranger said, pointing toward the kitchen. We both snapped our heads back toward the kitchen and saw Trashley standing tall on its thin fabric legs. It didn't move, but it was clear it had moved at some point. It was in a small pile on the counter when we last saw it. The whole energy in the house had changed in an unnatural direction, like seeing watch hands run backward. Dee's eyes were so wide I was afraid they'd pop out. He was gripping the flashlight so tight I thought he might shatter it. Drops of sweat formed on his bald head and rolled down his face. He wasn't a tiny man, and I was worried these scares might cause his heart to stop. Confusion is too weak a word to describe what we felt in the moment. Befuddlement, maybe, like discovering there had been aliens on Earth this whole time, and your boss was one of them. As we stared, the stranger said, "I think now you have a real mess on your hands." "I think I'm about to beat your ass," he said, turning to confront the man but not finding him standing there. "What the hell? Where did he go?" There was a rumble of thunder, and it shook the house. Dee and I both ducked like something was going to fall on us. I felt the thunderclap's vibrations in my guts. I glanced at the windows and noticed the sun still peeking through the edges of the blackout curtains. There were no clouds overhead, and I realized that the thunderclap didn't come from above us but from below. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words died in my throat when we heard something knocking inside the closed closet door. It was quiet initially, but each successive thump was louder than the last. Soon, the knocks were so loud and so violent the doorknob rattled with each rap. I glanced back into the kitchen. The jester was gone. It had either fallen behind some of the bags or had moved away. Neither option made me feel too good. If this thing could skulk through the trash without making a sound, it could sneak right up behind us without us knowing. I didn't know if it was violent, and I had no intention of finding out, but the thought nested in my brain and set up shop. "Dee, the doll is gone. Man, fuck this place," he said, nodding toward the door. "Let's get the hell out of here. Best idea I've heard today," I said, heading toward the door. Dee got there first, and when he grabbed the handle, he let out a painful yelp. I didn't need to ask what happened because I had heard the sizzle. He pulled his hand back, and the mark had already reddened and started to swell. "What the hell?" he said, blowing on his hand as if his breath would cure it. The knocking in the closet started up again. It was loud from the jump, but the noise that bothered me was hearing the doorknob turn and the closet door squeak open. I ran out of the vestibule and back into the living room to discover the jester hanging from the handle. Its half face was turned up into a crooked smile. "Deep," I said, my voice trailing. He walked over to me, and when he saw Trashley hanging from the door, all the blood ran from his face. Hello?" I offered to the open door. Nothing but silence was coming from the closet. I was happy for the silence. Loved every sweet second of it. Maybe it meant that all this voodoo shit was over, and we could get back to normal. It wasn't over. The closet door flew open, sending the jester doll flying into the kitchen and out of sight. We heard something breathing inside the darkness of the closet. Across the living room, there was a movement in the trash piles. I looked over to see the mannequin hand flying through the air and back into the closet. "We gotta go," I said. Dee slapped at the front door handle again, which was still hot. He shook his head. "I can't go this way." We burst back into the living room and heard more rumbling from the closet. Keeping a wide berth, we stayed away from the closet and eyed the back door in the kitchen. Before we could step in that direction, there was another bone-shaking thunderclap. This time, though, all the piles of trash from the back bedrooms flooded into the living room and created a wall of garbage blocking access to the back of the house. There was a growl from the closet, and we both looked over and saw that mannequin's hand reach out and grip the door frame. Whatever was in there had attached the arm to its body and was pulling into the living room. That was our signal to get the hell out. We turned to run, and all of the kitchen trash rushed forward. Like the back room trash, the bags formed a wall trapping us inside the living room. There was another growl from the closet, and a second arm reached out and grabbed the door frame. This arm looked organic but not well. The flesh was gray and ripped. You could see muscles and bones as the arm flexed on the door. "Fuck this," Dee said. He ran at the wall of trash blocking the kitchen and threw his whole massive frame into it. Like the Kool-Aid Man, he burst through and landed with a thud on the filthy floor. His plan worked, and even though he was covered in foul-smelling shit juice and in a living nightmare, he turned back to me with a smile so wide you would have thought he just won the Powerball. The smile quickly faded. From the top of the refrigerator, Trashley uncoiled like a spring and launched itself at Dee with an old rusty knife in its tiny hands. It landed with a chaotic thud but quickly scrambled to its feet and sunk the blade into Dee's calves. Dee screamed, but the doll just kept slashing at his legs. Blood was pouring out of a dozen wounds and mixing in with the rotten garbage on the floor. Dee tried grabbing the jester, but it quickly jabbed the knife forward and cleaned through Dee's hand. It tried pulling the blade out but was stuck on the gristle and tendons. I leaped through the wall and landed on the slick floor like Bambi stepping on ice. Unlike the deer, though, I kept my balance. Dee screamed at me to help him. I took one good step and booted Trashley in the face, sending it violently flying across the room. It landed against the stove like the ragdoll it was, and I heard its porcelain face crack even further. I reached down and pulled Dee up. He screamed in pain, and blood was gushing from his wounds, but he knew enough to get to stepping. There was a roar from the closet, and I peeked over my shoulder long enough to see a set of bull horns trying to wedge through the narrow closet door. "We gotta move," I said, shouldering Dee's weight under my own. He was struggling to walk, and the pain was exquisite, but to his credit, he was not letting the oozing wounds slow him down. I'm convinced he would have just ripped that leg off at the knee and hobbled out the door if he could have. We got to the back door, and I slapped at the handle. Like the front door, it was hot as well. I looked around for anything to cover my hand and spied an old rag in a nearby trash bag. With my free hand, I ripped it open and grabbed the rag. It was wet and smelled like death, but I didn't care. I touched the rag to the handle. It sizzled, and I could still feel the intense heat on my skin, but it worked well enough to try to open the door. The handle wouldn't budge. I dropped the rag and tried to boot the door open, but all that did was send pain up my leg and back. I swore, but it was drowned out by the crashing coming from the living room. I glanced back and saw the closet door frame being ripped from the walls. "Look out!" Dee yelled. I turned in time to see Trashley leaping through the air with a fork in their hands. It landed on my leg and sunk the fork's tines into the back of my knee. I screamed in pain and lost my footing, sending both Dee and I to the ground. I had collapsed onto the doll and could feel it jabbing my shoulders with the fork. I sat up, and the jester leapt from my face. Dee, without hesitation, plucked the doll out of the air like he was snagging a line drive. In one fluid motion, he turned and hurled it hard against the stove again. I scrambled to my feet, my knees burning, and tried to bash the door open. I hit it 3 times as hard as my body could handle, and all I did was damage my shoulder. I went to slam into it a 4th time when I felt Dee's hand grab the waist of my pants and yank me down. I landed hard on top of him, but he didn't mind. As I slammed into his chest, I turned to see Trashley grab the bottom of the stove with its stringy felt arms and easily lift it off the ground. With the ease of an ace pitcher hurling a fastball, the doll threw the stove in our direction. My old duck and cover drills came into practice, and I covered my neck and head as the stove flew over our bodies. The stove slammed into the back door, cracking it in half and knocking it off its hinges. Daylight streamed in, and our salvation was a mere few feet away. I could see our way out to freedom, but it was just an oasis. The stove bounced off the wall, nicked my back, and landed square on Dee's right arm. It shattered under the weight. He let out a scream like a wounded wild animal. The way we were tangled up sent his painful hollering directly into my ear. He thrashed under me, trying to get away from the weight of the stove, but was only making the break worse. I rolled off of him, grabbed the stove, and pushed it off his mangled arm. I reached down and helped Dee up, but he could barely move. I was afraid he was in shock. And if we lingered any longer, the thing pulling itself out of the closet would be out and after us. I didn't know what it had planned for us, but I didn't think it would invite us to a potluck or anything. "I know it hurts, bro, but we have to." Then I smelled the gas. I looked over to where the stove had been and saw the telltale wavy vision of leaking gas. At that moment, like divine inspiration, a plan came to me. I reached into my pocket and found my lighter. "I can't move," Dee said. "Just leave me, man. Told you I wasn't a bitch," I said. "Give me 20 feet of hustle, and I can get us out of this mess." I showed him the lighter, and he knew the plan. Dee nodded, gritted his teeth, and leaned his weight on me. He was in so much pain, but he bit his lip and moved. I spied an old paper towel roll and grabbed it in my free hand. I managed to help Dee get out of the house and walked him about 15 feet into the backyard. I placed him on the ground. He grabbed his arm and let out a whimper but didn't want to slow me down. "Take cover," I said, and he scooted away. I headed back to the house, but he called my name. I turned and saw his painful, sweaty face. "Toast these motherfuckers," he spat out. I nodded and headed back toward the house. I held the paper towel roll firmly and pulled out my lighter. I didn't know how fast the gas would ignite, but I knew I wouldn't be able to dawdle. I also realized this might be the last thing I ever did, but I was okay with that decision. It was worth it if I could send these 2 things back to hell. When I got to the door, the smell of gas was strong. This entire house was an accelerant, and everything would light up like a city's 4th of July celebration. I stepped inside, and it was surprisingly quiet. I looked over at where the closet door had been and only saw a massive hole. The thing had gotten out, but I didn't know where, or how, it was hiding. When I turned my attention back to the gas, I saw the jester. It was standing on the counter. As soon as I turned, it leaped at me. It landed on my neck and coiled its limbs around it like an anaconda. I struggled to breathe and fought with everything I had left in the tank. The jester's hands, previously soft and cotton-filled, were now tipped with razor-sharp claws. It raked those Kruger-esque daggers across my face. Blood gushed from my wounds and dripped into my eyes, blurring my vision. I screamed and pulled as hard as I could, but this little monster was velcroed to my body. I had dropped the lighter and paper towel roll in the struggle, but that was a secondary concern. I needed to get free before attempting to light this place up. I felt the doll's legs growing as it tried to wrap up my arms. I was face to face with its blinking, drawn-on eye. It opened its half-mouth, and inside was row upon row of porcelain daggers. It lunged for my face to bite my cheek, but I held it off as best as I could. The arms around my neck started to tighten, and around the edges of my eyes, the world began to dim. I was afraid I was done for. I felt my knees buckle, and I fell onto my back. The black edges of the vision were starting to tunnel. I had seconds to do something, or I'd be toast myself. I moved my thumbs under the jester's tightening arms and pushed with all my might. At first, it didn't budge, but then I felt the pressure lessen and could breathe again. "Fuck you!" I spat and funneled all my stored-up anger and resentment and strength into pushing this little clingy bitch off me. It snapped at my hands and caught my knuckles, but I kept going until its spindly arms were off my throat. I ripped its legs off my body and threw the jester right towards the gas leak. It crashed against the wall, its half-face shattering on impact. I searched around for my lighter and found it. I flicked the spark wheel so hard I feared it'd break. There were a few sparks, but nothing caught. I urged it on, taking a peek at where the monster was. As I looked up, I saw the jester's new face. The porcelain had broken away to reveal a red and black pulsating mass of muscle, blood, and gore that dripped from the wound. There was a bellow from the living room, and a massive creature that looked strikingly like a minotaur, albeit with one mannequin arm, came stomping into view. It must have sensed my presence because it roared again and charged at the wall. The wall shuddered and cracked but held for the time being. I knew it'd come down easy the next time it ran at the wall. I was running out of time. I pressed my thumb down hard on the spark wheel and gave it a skin-ripping spin. It worked. There was finally a dancing orange flame at the edge of the bick. I held it against the paper towel roll and waited for it to catch. The wait felt painstakingly long. The minotaur bellowed again and slammed into the wall. Its massive head came through. I looked at the jester, getting down in a crouch to leap at me again. "Light, goddammit, light!" I screamed. The temperature finally hit 451 degrees, and the flame transferred from the lighter to the towel roll. I threw the roll at the jester as it took to the air. The roll hit him, and the impact sent them both to the floor. They landed right near the gas line. I managed to get about 7 feet outside before the flame caught the gas and sent the entire house sky high. My body was thrown like a rag doll 20 feet into the neighbor's backyard. I landed on my shoulder with a sickening thud and blacked out. Hours later, I woke up in a hospital room. A dozen or so machines around me were beeping and keeping me going. Pain racked my entire body, and each breath was a world of discomfort I'd never been to before. But I was alive. Officially, the cause of the explosion was a gas leak. The fire department said it might have been leaking for years, but it was hard to determine because of all the stuff crammed into the home. Dee was in the hospital for about 2 weeks before being released. I was stuck for a few more weeks, as the explosion had rocked my brain and gave me post-concussion symptoms. We shared a smoke outside on Dee's last day in the hospital, We talked about what happened and thought it best not to be totally honest with everyone. This was mainly because we were sure everyone hadn't been honest with us, especially Pete. The stranger had name-dropped him specifically, and Pete acted very strangely in the explosion's aftermath. He was surprised we had survived and asked a lot of odd questions, some of which seemed to suggest he knew more than he was letting on. He has slyly started looking for a new job, and I'll follow him when I get out. I'm counting down the days not only because I'm sick of hospital food but also because I don't feel safe here. Pete keeps popping in, and I swear I saw the stranger hanging around the lobby. But what really concerns me and makes me think I might not make it out of here is what happened last night. At about 3 in the morning, when everyone on the floor was sleeping, I heard a bell jingling in the corridor outside my room. When I went out to look, I saw the shadow of a short, long-limbed person turn the corner and disappear. The next story. They say it takes 2 days before your cats will eat your body if you die. Well, I can tell you that it's longer than that, but not by much. I have 5 cats. Yes, 5. My fiancée and I started with 1, then graduated to 3 after a friend started having allergic reactions and had to give his 2 up. Then, the same happened a few years later with one of her friends. Now we're at 5. It's too many cats in my opinion, but what can I do at this point? They're here to stay and I love them, unconditionally. A while ago now, my fiancée left for a trip to Thailand. She's into Muay Thai and so is her brother, so he invited her to go with him on a training trip his gym was taking. This left me home alone for a while which, as an introvert as well as a professional writer who is currently in the midst of his second novel, was not unwelcome. I was looking forward to some valuable alone time and a distraction-free environment in which to make some progress on my writing. 3 days into her trip, I had been doing just that. Around 4 p.m., I finished my 3rd chapter in as many days. I was thrilled, but needed a change of pace as my mind was beginning to give off sparks. One of the lights in the high ceiling of our living room had gone out, so I figured I'd take this time to replace it. I went into the garage and got the ladder, then set it up under the light. I stood on the second from top step looking up. Even though I'm tall, I could still barely reach the light. I went up to the next rung knowing full well it wasn't safe. I could reach it now, but it was still at an awkward distance. I thought about it for a second, then decided to just go for it. I didn't want to have to find another ladder or call an electrician, plus I'm pretty sure-footed, so I stepped up onto the top of the ladder. I could comfortably reach the light now. The bulb was a pretty standard screw-in type that could easily be changed out, except that there was a thin metal rim that went about halfway around the circumference of the fixture and blocked the bulb from coming out. Try as I might, I could not figure out how to get the bulb around it or get it off. I finally resorted to brute force and gave it a good yank. Nothing happened. I yanked it harder. Still nothing. I gave it one more firm pull and it came off. Unfortunately, so did my feet from the ladder. I came to lying on my back, staring up at the broken fixture. I couldn't move. I could tell I was breathing, and a dull aching in my back that seemed many miles away told me that I still had some life in my nerves. But otherwise, nothing. Panic didn't last long as there wasn't anything I could do. Since I was conscious and could feel a bit, I figured it would pass. I resolved myself to wait it out and began focusing on my breathing. Not only as a meditative practice, but to help regain control of myself too. As time passed, I could sense faint nudges around my feet, hands and head. Now and then a shock of fur would pass before my eyes. Once, my breathing became more difficult, and far off somewhere I could feel 4 little paws on my chest. They were hungry, but there was nothing I could do. They'd have to wait it out just like me. Darkness fell and then the light returned. My situation hadn't improved. More and more I felt the little nudges or the poke of a paw on my face. I kept focusing on my breathing. If I was making progress with it, I couldn't tell, but for the time being, it was keeping me sane. Again night fell and again dawn broke with no improvement. The nudges and pokes were getting more frequent and far more desperate. I could feel a gnawing sensation in my own stomach and my lips were beginning to feel dry and cracked. Sometime during the third night is when I felt the teeth. Again, that faraway sensation, almost as if it were happening to someone else. Even so, the feeling was unmistakable. Like two steel rods sinking into the flesh of my calf. Then a tug. Then a rip. I tried with all my might to make myself scream. Nothing. I felt the teeth again. Another pull. Another rip. A wet chewing sound. I waited for my lungs to fill with air, and then focused all my energy into forcing it out. A low, strained groan escaped my lips. But it was enough. The teeth stopped, and I felt the faint vibrations of little footsteps going away. I woke up later in the night to what felt like a small piece of sandpaper rubbing against my leg. Someone was licking up the blood around the wound. Again I groaned. The licking stopped for a moment, and then began once more. I tried to kick out with my leg and managed a small twitch. I heard paws run off again. It was starting to feel like a small fire was smoldering in my leg. Just embers for now, but it wasn't good. How long had they been at it while I was asleep? How much longer could I hold them off? What was left of my leg? How much longer could I last like this? This same cycle continued for days. First, the feel of teeth in the flesh of my leg, arm, or sometimes my face. Next, a twitch or a groan to shake them off. Sometimes more than one set of teeth at a time. Sometimes they wouldn't leave. I could feel the wetness of blood on parts of me. I could feel the small embers of pain and infection all over. My stomach felt like it was filled with nails. My mouth was like hot sand. I was growing weak. With what was now left of my sanity, I tried to count the days I'd been lying there. She must have been close to returning home. It must have been long enough that someone knows something's wrong. I had to be close to the end. It was hard to tell though. With the sensation of 5 little sets of teeth all tearing at 5 different parts of me. Concentration was in short supply. I wanted to shake them off, but I was so tired. All I wanted was to rest. I forgot about my breathing. My eyes began to go black. My thoughts began to fade. Far off somewhere, I heard the rumble of a car engine. I heard the jagged metal grinding of a key in a lock. I heard hinges creak. I heard footsteps. I heard screaming.